Okay, so as we've been dealing with lists, we've talked about, just a typical list. We talked about two-dimensional lists. Well, now we're going to kind of go to the nth dimension. When you think about it, all we're really doing is nesting lists. So it's a lot like before, where we talked about nested ifs. You have if, and then an if, and then an if, and then you got if else, else else. We can do nested ifs and things like that, or nested for loops, so on and so forth. We can also do nested lists. And in the last video, we did a two-dimensional list where we had lists inside of lists. So if you remember the last video when we had the numbers 1 through 14, we had each of those broke apart in lists inside of one bigger list. This is to the nth dimension. We're adding another piece to this list, okay? So I have this list called multi-floor theater. So the premise here is based on the last video. So in the last one, we constructed our theater where we had just our single floor. We had our rows and our columns. We figured out if somebody wanted to sit in row T, seat 6. This is how we could do that based on that two-dimensional list. Here, we're just adding another layer to that. So the premise of this is that there are 2 floors in my movie theater. So I have seats, I can put people on the first floor, and I have seats where I can put people on the second floor, and I want to account for which seats are taken. So to do that, I have to take my two-dimensional list and expand it to a bigger list. So I'm adding another dimension to this. So what I have here is I have a very, very outer loop. And what we can equate this to is this would be the floor in the theater. Okay, is what you can kind of equate this outer range to. Would be the theater in our the floors in our theater. Down here we have our nested list comprehension like we did in the last video. Okay, but what we're doing is we're going to have a row or a list, okay, that's going to have 5 dashes, and then we're going to create 4 of them, and we're going to do all of that twice, okay? So we're going to have basically this done twice, okay? So we're going to have a row of 5 seats. We're going to have 4 of them, and we're going to put all of those in the list twice, okay? And that's what this appending is. So let's take a look at what that looks like, okay? So what we have here is I'm going to print out, kind of like we did in the last video. I'm going to print each floor, if you will, of our theater by doing this. And then I'm going to print each row, or one particular row, and then one particular seat in that row. What I want you to see is how this whole thing plays out. All right? So I'm going to run this. Yep, save it. All right. So what I have here is, you can see I have a two-dimensional list here. Okay? This is a two-dimensional list from here over, right? Because I have these lists, right, inside of a bigger list. But instead of having just one nested list like this, I have 2. There's one here, and there's one here. Now, that I call by this outer number, this first number, because this whole thing, okay, all the way across here, that is the first element in the bigger list. And this is the second element in the bigger list, okay? And then, this is where it gets interesting. Inside of that first element, okay, inside of that first element, the big nested list, I want the first element inside of that list. So I'm looking at this first one right here. This first nested list here, I want this first one in that. So that's 0. So that's 0, 0. Then if I want the first element inside of that list, I know, right? I'm going to use a 0, and that is this one right here. So instead of referencing it just by a row and a column, we have this third dimension. Now, it's kind of interesting, and I know this is very, very kind of out there. I don't blame you for stopping the video right now and just totally discarding this. This is something that is a little more advanced. It's very cool, but if you don't want to be confused, you can just set this video aside and go on to the next one. I have no problem with that. This is not part of the curriculum. This is not something to be tested on. So if you want to just stop now and dump it, that's fine. So if you do, go ahead and stop it and move on. So you want to stick around, do you? Okay, that's good. All right, so let's see what the application is here. So what I want to do is I want to find a way to track what floor they're sitting on and what seat they're in based on the row. Okay, so I want to find out what seat of what row of what floor is what we're trying to track. All right, so if you're wondering what this statement here is for, that is the list comprehension version of this. Okay, like I said, if you want to punt, you want to stop, I get it. Okay, I get it. If you want to stick around, great. Now, what we're going to do then is I'm going to say, let's say somebody wants to sit on floor 1, row 2, seat 2. All right, so floor 1, row 2, seat 2. Well, the way this works, because of the way we wrote the program, we're going to go by floor, row, and seat. Okay? Floor, row, and seat. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to verify this. Multi-floor theater. Okay? And we're going to print, let's see, floor 1. So we're going to do a 0. And we're going to do, let's see, row 2. All right, let's just change this. Let's make this, well, we can leave it row 2. That's fine. We can leave it row 2. We'll make this a 1. And seat 2, we'll make this a 1. Okay? So, well, let's not even do that. Let's just print this. Okay? What I want to do is I want to print the floor and the row. So I'm going to comment out the rest of this code because I don't want to confuse any more than it already is. So what I'm going to do is somebody wants to sit in floor 1, so I have my 0. They want to sit on row 2, that goes here, and then seat 2 goes here. So this is the same, okay? This is the same as doing this, multi-floor theater 1, 2, no, 1, 1, no, 1, 2, 2, right? So this is the same thing, and we're going to do is equal to V, okay? These two are doing the same thing, All right. So somebody's going to be, actually, this is going to be floor 2, because remember how this works. It's a 0 and a 1, so 1 is the second floor. So this is going to put somebody on the second floor. They're going to be in the third row, and they're going to be in the third seat. Okay, that's what that's going to do, because these are index values, right? 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2. So that's where they're going to be at. And so what I'm going to do is, I need to change this. I want to make this a 1 and make this a, I think a 1 will be 0, 1, 2. We need to make that. Because what I want to do is I want to print just that row and show you where it's at. Okay? So let's run this and see if it works like we think it should. Okay? So there it is, right? So this is one row inside that whole list. Now what we could do is we could do this. Let me back this off just one more. Okay? And you can see here is that nested inner loop, or the nested inner list. And you can see here there's element 0, element 1, element 2, right? That's where we got our 2 right here. Okay, that's where I got my 2 right there. All right, this 2 came from where the V was actually at, right? So if I run this, in this, which is element 2, it's 0, 1, and 2. Okay? Like I said, I know this is like way out there, but the more you play around with this, the better off you'll be, believe me. Okay? So down here a little farther, we've added some more things. Okay? What we got is some additional seating. Okay? And then I'm going to comment out the last bit of code for right now. But what I can do now is say, okay, well, let's print multi-floor theater. And I want to print out the first floor, so that'd be a 0. And gotta get rid of that, it's a parenthesis. And I'm going to print out the second floor. T-H-E-A-T-E-R. I gotta make sure I spell that right. Okay? So we're going to print out the first floor and the second floor and see what seats are being used, right? The reason why I use 0 and 1 is because that's how we set it up. The first number is our internal elements of the big list. So this is the internal element of the big list. This is the internal element of the smaller list. And then this is the individual element in that list. It kind of tapers down, right? So you got to think about it as being big nest, little nest, actual element. Okay? So let's run this. No. This could be good. All right. So if you take a look, right, here is the. All right, let me get rid of this one here because it's going to confuse us. Let me get rid of this. All right. I'm going to comment this out and rerun this program because I want to eliminate that confusion. I just want these 2 print statements. So let's do this instead. All right. So inside of our big list, here is the first floor, and then here is the second floor. Okay? So that's how I'm able to do the 0 and the 1. Okay? Let me just kind of give you another for example here. Let me go back up. I want to comment out this, and this, and this, and this. I'm going to comment those out for a minute, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to print the entire theater just so you can get an understanding of how this works. All right. So this is going to print the entire nth dimension list, and then this is going to print each of the rows. So let me show you. Okay. So this here, let me move this over so you can see it. It kind of goes off the page, but this is the entire movie theater list, okay? And if you notice, you can see the 3 square brackets over here. It's because there is a small list in a bigger list, right? And then in a much bigger list yet. And then inside of that big list, we have an element, we actually have 2 elements that are nested lists. And then in each of those elements are lists. And it's just a way of doing some nth dimensional type stuff when you're talking about things like this, or like hotels. If you have different floors in a hotel, you have different seats, or I'm sorry, different rooms. Maybe you have multiple towers. For example, if you go to Las Vegas, they have different towers at the different casinos, okay? And it allows you to pick a tower, pick a floor, pick a seat, or a room in this case. And that's what this is doing. We're picking a floor, picking a row, and then picking a seat for us to sit in, okay? So it really does get kind of interesting when you look at this. Now, what the last print statement does, okay, I'm going to bring those into play. I'm going to comment out these statements. And what this last print statement does is allows me to see how these seats are dispersed inside of my theater. All right, so if I run this, whoops, indentation doesn't match. What did I not do? I want it to be there. So let's try this again. It always wants to give me crap. Okay. I don't know why you're wanting to cause me grief right now. So let's just do this. All right. I don't want it there. Oh, you know what? I know why. Okay, let me do this. Put that there. The problem you get into is this crazy indentation stuff sometimes. I went through and commented some stuff, and now it wants to be a pain in the hind end. That's okay. We'll just fix our indentation. I'm going to go back here. Now I want to print. That should work. There we go. So you can see here how it's printing out the different seats in my, oops, I got the print statement in the wrong place. Go back it up one more. There we go. So what you can see here is here's the first floor, here's the second floor. And then the way this does it is it divides it down here in the middle to show you the different floors. So for example, you can see I've got floor 0, seat 0. So these are basically the floor, the row, and the seat. And this is what this is showing, where those are at. Okay? So it really does get quite interesting if you go to the end of the first row. So if I put a 4 here and a 4 here, this is going to show you the end of those rows on those floors. So if we do this here, right? So there you can see the end. Remember, each row has 5 seats, and there's multiple rows per floor. So if you do the math, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So on each of these, there's 5 dashes because there's 5 seats. This is how it determines between the different rows. So, this is row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, etc. And then these are the different floors that go with it. Okay? Again, I know you're kind of looking at this going, holy cow. The idea is we are creating a nested list is what it amounts to. Again, it just allows us to go deeper into the problem, deeper into it. If you want, I'll put this up on GitHub, so you don't have to worry about pausing the video to type it all in. I'll put this up in the week 4 folder on my GitHub. You'll also find up there the other list programs that I wrote. Those will all be up there in the week 4. Play around with them. Like I said, this video here, this is more advanced. We don't do too much with these, but you could if you wanted to. But for what we're doing, this is above and outside of the scope of the curriculum. But it is kind of cool to play around with. If you have questions about it and you want me to explain it further to you, let me know. Otherwise, this is what it is, okay? All right. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Get a hold of me. Otherwise, I bid you good morning, good afternoon, good evening.